Have you ever felt this strange kind of exhaustion? Not from doing too much, but from waiting too long? Not waiting for a message, not waiting for a call, but waiting for someone to finally become who they promised to be. For Aquarius, this isn't about heartbreak. It's about something quieter, heavier. That moment when you realize you're not in pain anymore, you're just tired of hoping. And the truth is, the most powerful shock doesn't come from what they did. It comes from what you've been silently accepting. If this already feels familiar, leave a comment with the word waiting and stay with me. Because what you're about to hear is not a prediction, it's a mirror. I imagine you sitting there right now, not dramatic, not falling apart, just unusually still, like something inside you shifted. But you cannot name exactly what it was. It is not sadness in the way movies describe it. It feels more like a quiet pressure behind the chest, a kind of emotional gravity, the weight of realizing that nothing is wrong, yet nothing feels right either. You keep replaying small moments in your mind, not the big arguments, not the obvious disappointments, but the subtle ones, the pauses in their voice, the way certain promises slowly change shape, the feeling that conversations started to sound familiar, like you have had them before, just in different months, different seasons, with the same ending. And what makes it even stranger is this: you are not angry. That is what surprises you most. You are calm, too calm, as if your nervous system already accepted something your heart is still catching up to. Yet there is a kind of intelligence in this silence, not the kind you learn in school, but the kind your body carries. Because long before the mind understands, the body always knows. It knows when waiting turns into self-neglect. It knows when hope becomes a habit instead of a choice. It knows when love starts costing more energy than it gives back. And maybe that is why this feels so intense. Not because something ended, but because something finally became clear. You are not reacting to a moment. You are reacting to a pattern where you kept giving time, kept explaining, kept understanding, kept making emotional room for someone who never quite arrived fully. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you felt truly chosen, without needing to wait for it? Not assumed, not implied, not postponed. You actually chosen. Most Aquarians struggle with this in a very specific way. You are loyal to potential. You see who people could become, not just who they are right now. And that gift can quietly turn into a trap. Because sometimes you stay connected to a future version of someone who exists only in your imagination, while the present version keeps showing you exactly how much they are capable of giving. And that is the moment where the shock really lives, not in what they did, but in what you tolerated while believing you were being patient. This is not about blaming yourself. It is about noticing something sacred. Your awareness has shifted. Your nervous system is no longer asleep inside the story. You are beginning to feel the difference between waiting with love and waiting out of fear, and that difference changes everything. It's because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You may still care, you may still feel connected, but something inside you has quietly stepped back, as if your soul finally sat down next to you and said, I think we are ready to tell ourselves the truth now. Not in a painful way, not in a dramatic way, just in a real way. So, tell me this, Aquarius, and answer it honestly in your own heart. If nothing changes from this point on, how long are you willing to stay exactly where you are? Not because of them, but because of you. I keep thinking about the way time feels different for you. Not fast, not slow, just suspended. Like a clock that keeps ticking, but the room never really changes. You wake up, go through the motions, answer messages, make plans, and somewhere in the background of every ordinary moment, there is this quiet internal question. Is this still going somewhere, or am I just learning how to stay? Waiting has its own texture. It is not loud. It does not scream. It whispers. It shows up in the way you keep checking your phone, even when you already know there is nothing new. In the way you hesitate before making future plans, just in case something finally shifts. In the way your life starts organizing itself around a possibility instead of a reality. And the hardest part is that waiting can look responsible, mature, patient. From the outside, it even looks noble. You tell yourself you are being understanding, that everyone needs time, that growth is not linear. All of that is true. And still, something inside you feels increasingly distant from yourself. Not sad, not angry, just slightly absent. As if your energy is always standing one step ahead of your body, leaning toward a future that keeps rearranging its own arrival. There is a particular loneliness in that. Not the kind where you feel abandoned, but the kind where you feel invisible in your own story. You are present for everyone else, listening, supporting, holding emotional space. Yet no one is really asking what it costs you to keep holding that space open. Aquarius, you have a rare way of loving. You love with perspective, with vision, with a belief in what could be. But sometimes that vision becomes a place you hide in, a place where reality does not have to make a final decision yet. And so, the days blend together, not painful enough to collapse, not fulfilling enough to expand, just stretched. You may notice that your dreams feel different lately, less detailed, less vivid, like your imagination is conserving energy. That is usually a sign that the soul is tired of carrying unfinished narratives, not because it wants to leave, but because it wants to breathe again. There is nothing wrong with you for waiting. Waiting is not weakness, it is devotion to meaning. But there is a quiet question waiting beneath the waiting. What are you postponing in yourself while you postpone your life for someone else? What part of you is paused, muted, on hold? You do not need to answer that out loud. And just notice what surfaces when you ask it. Because the real cost of waiting is not time, it is presence. It is the moments you are physically here, but emotionally elsewhere. The laughter that feels slightly incomplete. The successes that feel strangely hollow. The sense that your life is happening in draft mode. And maybe this is the deeper truth you are starting to feel. Not that someone failed you, but that you have been faithful to a story that no longer includes your full aliveness. Tell me something gently. If no one ever gave you a final answer, if the door simply stayed half open forever, would you still choose to keep standing there? Or would you finally turn around and see how much of the world has been quietly waiting for you instead? There is a moment that does not feel dramatic at all. No storm, no confrontation. Just a soft internal click, like something finally sliding into place. You are not shocked. You are calm. And that calm is what unsettles you. Because it means you already knew. Not consciously, not in words, but in the quiet way your body kept adjusting its expectations. In the way you stopped asking certain questions because the answers were already living somewhere under your skin. Truth does not always arrive as a revelation. Sometimes it arrives as recognition. A memory of something you sensed long before you were ready to name it. You start noticing the pauses in conversations, the stories that never quite align, the emotional timelines that do not match the promises. Nothing is technically a lie, but not everything is whole. And that is the kind of truth that takes the longest to accept. Not betrayal, not deception, just partial presence. You realize there were details you were not invited into, decisions made in rooms you were never shown, connections that never fully closed before new ones were offered. Not because you were unworthy, but because clarity was inconvenient. And you, Aquarius, have always had a way of respecting other people's inner chaos. You give space. You allow complexity. You do not demand emotional explanations on a deadline. But there is a difference between being understanding and being excluded from reality. The hidden truth is not that someone chose differently. It is that you were asked to participate in a story without being given the full script. So you filled in the gaps with hope, with imagination, with your natural ability to see potential where others see uncertainty. And it worked for a while, until your nervous system started noticing the misalignment. You began feeling tired after conversations that were not heavy, restless after interactions that were not dramatic, unsettled by silence that was not technically silence. That is intuition processing information the mind is not caught up to yet. This is where your sign becomes important. Aquarius is ruled by awareness, by pattern recognition, by the ability to sense systems beneath surface behavior. You do not need proof to know something is off. You feel it in the way energy flows, or stops flowing. And the truth that finally emerges is not cruel, it is simple. There were layers you were not allowed to see, not hidden out of malice, but hidden because honesty would have required a decision, and no one wanted to be the one to make it. So time was used instead. Ambiguity, soft words, open endings. Until you started living inside someone else's uncertainty. The most difficult part is not the disappointment, it is the self-awareness. Realizing you adapted to an emotional environment that never fully included you. Realizing you were patient with what was incomplete because you believed in what could become complete. There is no villain here, only people navigating their own unfinished selves. And now the question is not about what they did, it is about what you will do with what you see. Because once truth becomes visible, it cannot return to the subconscious. It lives in your posture, in your tone, in the way you listen differently now. So, let me ask you something gently. If you knew everything exactly as it is, without missing pieces or softened edges, would you still choose to stay in the same emotional position? Or would you finally allow yourself to stand somewhere where your presence is not optional and your reality does not require interpretation? It feels different now, not heavier, but quieter, like the moment after a storm when everything is still wet and you finally hear your own breathing again. I keep thinking about how you did not stay because you were weak. You stayed because you saw potential where others saw convenience, because you believed in the future version of someone more than the present version standing in front of you. That is such an Aquarius thing to do, to fall in love with what could be, not just what is. You were never trapped, no one locked the door, but hope has a way of building invisible walls, soft ones, comfortable ones, the kind you do not even realize are there until you stop and ask yourself why your life feels paused. There is a special kind of exhaustion that comes from waiting for something that keeps almost happening, almost choosing you, almost showing up, almost becoming real. It keeps your heart awake, but your life on hold. And you tell yourself stories, not lies, just gentle edits. Maybe they are confused, maybe timing is off, maybe they just need more space. You become so patient that even your own needs start to feel like they are asking for too much. I want to say this in the kindest way possible. Sometimes people do not need to reject you. They just need to keep you uncertain enough to stay available. And uncertainty feels safer than rejection, because at least hope still exists there. Hope does not hurt as sharply as truth, but it drains you much slower, day by day, message by message, silence by silence. You start living in between texts, between plans, between promises that sound beautiful, but never land anywhere solid. Your heart becomes a waiting room, and you decorate it with excuses so it feels less lonely. But deep down, you knew. Not with panic, with a quiet knowing. The kind that shows up late at night when you are alone and honest for 5 seconds. The kind that asks softly, how long have you been preparing for a future that never actually schedules you in it? Here is something no one tells Aquarius enough. Being chosen should not feel like being postponed. Love does not ask you to shrink your timeline until it fits someone else's comfort. You were not asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person to meet you at your level of clarity. And I wonder, if you stopped waiting today, what would you suddenly have energy for again? Your body, your creativity, your voice, your life. Because the moment you release the fantasy of being almost chosen, something shifts. Not dramatically, not in fireworks, but in breath. In posture, in the way your thoughts stop orbiting one person and start coming back home to you. Aquarius, you were never meant to be a backup plan for someone else's indecision. You are the kind of soul that thrives in mutual vision, in shared direction, in connections that do not need to stall to survive. And maybe the real question is not why they kept you waiting. Maybe it is this: what part of you learned to accept being half-loved just so you would not have to be alone? Sit with that gently. No judgment, no rush, just awareness. Because awareness is the first light. And once you see clearly, you rarely stay in the same place for long. There is a strange tension inside you now. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet pressure that never really leaves. Like two voices living in the same chest, both telling different versions of the truth. One part of you is tired in a very honest way. Not angry, not bitter. Just deeply aware that something has been stretched far beyond what it was meant to hold. That part of you wants simplicity again. Clear air, open space, a life that does not require constant emotional translation. But the other part of you still remembers the beginning, the energy, the spark, the version of yourself that believed this connection meant something larger than it became. And that part is afraid, not of the person, but of the story ending. Because endings feel like failure to you. Not externally, internally, as if leaving means you misread the universe. It's as if walking away means you were wrong about your own intuition. And that is where the real conflict lives. Not between you and them, but between who you are now and who you thought you would become through this. You keep asking yourself questions that have no clean answers. Am I being patient or am I abandoning myself? Is this growth or is this fear dressed as loyalty? If I let go, am I choosing myself or just giving up on something sacred? Aquarius, you are wired to see patterns, to believe every connection carries meaning, to assume that if something entered your life, it must have a purpose worth completing. So, you stay longer than most people would, not because you cannot leave, but because you are still trying to understand the lesson. And here is the part no one prepares you for. Sometimes the lesson is not about saving the connection. Sometimes the lesson is about saving yourself from the version of love that slowly erases you. You start negotiating with your own boundaries. I will wait one more month. I will see how I feel after one more conversation. I will stay until I am absolutely sure. But certainty rarely arrives in situations built on emotional fog. What arrives instead is numbness, not pain, not joy. Just a soft dullness where your desires used to be loud. You go through the motions of connection while your soul quietly steps back. You answer messages, you smile, you say it is fine, but something inside you already knows it is not being fed anymore. This is the dangerous middle space, where nothing is terrible enough to force change, but nothing is good enough to justify staying. Where you are not heartbroken, but you are not alive either. And maybe the real conflict is this. You are afraid that if you choose yourself, you will lose the story you built around this person. And that story has been your emotional home for a long time. Letting go does not just mean losing them. It means losing the future you rehearsed in your mind, the conversations you never had, the version of yourself that existed only in possibility. So, you stand between two fears, the fear of staying and disappearing slowly, and the fear of leaving and facing empty space. But I want to ask you something gently. When was the last time you felt fully present in your own life without waiting for someone else to decide how you should feel? Because your soul is not confused, it is just tired of being ignored. And you do not need to prove endurance through emotional suffering. You do not need to stay stuck to validate the depth of your heart. Sometimes the bravest thing for Aquarius is not holding on. It is admitting that a connection taught you everything it could, and now it is asking you to become someone new. Not through force, not through drama, just through quiet honesty. And that honesty sounds like this. I can love deeply, and still choose to walk toward a life that loves me back. Something shifts quietly inside you now. Not like a breakthrough, not like an explosion of clarity. More like the moment before dawn, when the sky is still dark but the air feels different. You begin to notice how tired you are of explaining your own feelings to yourself, how every day has required some kind of emotional justification, why you stayed, why you hoped, why you kept making space for something that never fully arrived. And for the first time, you stop arguing with the questions. You let them sit, you let them breathe, you let them exist without trying to answer them immediately. There is a strange relief in that, not knowing, but also not pretending anymore. You start to sense that this moment is not about them at all. It is about the way you have been standing inside your own life, half present, half waiting, as if your future needed someone else's permission to begin. Aquarius, you have always been good at imagining what could be. You live comfortably in possibility, in alternate timelines, in emotional potential. But now, something in you wants reality instead of imagination. Not fantasy love, not hypothetical change, not someday energy. You want something you can feel in your body, in your breath, in your mornings. And that is where the awakening truly begins. Not when you decide to leave or stay, but when you realize you have been postponing yourself. You notice how often you delayed your own growth while waiting for someone to meet you at a certain level. How many parts of your life were put on pause? Plans, desires, versions of yourself that required courage to step into. It is not resentment you feel, it is recognition. You start asking softer questions now, not about the relationship, but about you. What kind of life actually nourishes me? What kind of energy feels like home? Who am I when I am not trying to be understood by someone else? These questions do not demand immediate answers. They simply open doors inside you that have been locked for a long time. And behind those doors is not emptiness. There is curiosity. There is creativity. There is a version of you that has been waiting patiently for your attention. You realize something important. You have been seeking validation from a place that was never meant to define your worth. You were hoping someone else would confirm what your soul already knows. That you deserve consistency, presence, emotional safety, not as a reward, but as a baseline. This awakening does not make you cold. It makes you honest. It does not erase your capacity to love. It simply removes your need to beg for it. You begin to understand that love is not supposed to feel like a test you must pass. It is not supposed to feel like waiting in a room with no clock. It is not supposed to require you to abandon your own timeline. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this moment is this. You are no longer asking what they will choose. You are finally asking what you will, not from fear, not from ego, but from self-respect. There is a quiet power in realizing that your life does not need a perfect ending to be meaningful. It only needs your presence, your participation, your willingness to move forward even without guarantees. And maybe that is the real awakening, not about changing your situation, but about changing your relationship with yourself. So, let me ask you something gently. If no one else was watching your life, what would you choose next? At first, it does not feel like change. It feels like distance, a gentle one. The kind that arrives without announcements, without confrontation, without any clear moment you can point to and say this is where everything shifted. You simply begin to notice that your phone stays quiet longer, and somehow that quiet does not hurt the way it used to. You notice that your thoughts no longer orbit around one person. They start drifting back toward you, your body, your time, your inner landscape. It is not withdrawal, it is realignment. You are still kind, still open, still capable of deep feeling, but you are no longer leaking your energy into empty space. There is a new rhythm in your days now, less emotional noise, more internal listening. You start waking up with questions that belong to your life, not someone else's potential. What do I want to build? What do I need to release? What kind of future feels honest, not impressive? And slowly, without force, your imagination changes shape. It stops projecting scenarios. It starts designing a life. Aquarius, this is your unique transformation. Not dramatic, not loud, not performative. It happens entirely inside your nervous system. You do not need closure to move forward. You do not need permission to evolve. You simply stop waiting for something that no longer matches who you are becoming. You feel lighter, but not in the careless sense. Lighter in the way someone feels after putting down a heavy bag they forgot they were carrying. Your chest opens. Your breath deepens. Your attention returns to the present moment. You notice beauty again. Small things. Music that hits differently. Conversations that nourish instead of drain. Silence that feels like peace, not abandonment. And something important happens here. You stop needing to be chosen, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally chose yourself. This is where your power returns, not through control, but through clarity. You no longer define love as endurance. You no longer measure connection by how much you can tolerate. You begin to understand that love is not a test of how long you can survive emotional uncertainty. Love is how safe you feel being fully yourself. So you shift positions inside the story, not as the one waiting for a message, but as the one observing your own growth, not as the one hoping for change, but as the one becoming change. There is no bitterness in this stage, only quiet maturity. You wish them well, genuinely, without needing them to come back. You start investing your energy where it multiplies instead of evaporates. Your work, your health, your friendships, your inner world. And the most beautiful part is this. You realize you are no longer trying to escape loneliness. You are learning how to enjoy your own presence. You are not empty. You are spacious. You are not detached. You are grounded. And here is the question that gently opens the next layer of your journey. If you are no longer waiting for anyone to complete you, what kind of life feels possible now? And somehow, without realizing it, you arrive at a place that does not need a name. It does not feel like victory. It does not feel like loss. It feels like standing in open air after a long time indoors. There is no final conversation in your head anymore. No imaginary closure scene. No version of the past you keep replaying, hoping it will resolve differently. The story simply grows quiet, not empty, just complete in its own unfinished way. You notice something subtle. You no longer measure your days by whether they appear or not. You no longer check your worth against someone else's availability. Your emotional weather is no longer tied to another person's mood. And that is when you understand. The ending was never about them. It was about the moment you stopped needing proof to exist fully. That the moment you stopped asking the universe to explain why something happened, the moment you accepted that some chapters are not meant to make sense, only to make you more real. Aquarius, this is the kind of ending no one talks about. The one where nothing explodes, no doors slam, no dramatic farewell. Life just continues. But you continue differently. You start making decisions that feel aligned instead of reactive. You choose rest without guilt. You choose silence without fear. You choose your own pace without apology. And in that space, something heals quietly. Not the memory, not the story, but the way you relate to yourself inside it. You stop defining healing as getting what you wanted. You redefine it as becoming someone who no longer needs to beg life for permission to feel whole. There is a new kind of confidence now. It's not loud, not performative. It lives in your nervous system. You trust your timing, you trust your instincts. You trust that your heart is capable of surviving unanswered questions. You begin to see the past with softness instead of pain. Not because it did not hurt, but because it no longer controls you. And this is where the real ending reveals itself, not as a conclusion, but as a return to your own center, to your own body, to your own desires. You realize that you were never meant to disappear into someone else's story. You were meant to write your own, not perfectly, not without mistakes, but honestly. You understand that love is not about being chosen. It is about choosing to stay alive inside your own life. You do not need an apology to move on. You do not need an explanation to feel free. And you do not need a final answer to deserve peace. Sometimes the bravest ending is simply walking toward a future that does not require you to wait anymore. And maybe the most healing realization of all is this: nothing was wasted. Not the hope, not the pain, not the time. Every moment taught you how deeply you can feel, how much you can grow, how resilient your heart truly is. So, the story does not end with reunion. It does not end with goodbye. It ends with you standing in your own life again, fully present, fully awake, no longer asking when something will finally begin, because it already has. Let me ask you one last question, softly. If you are no longer waiting for closure, what are you finally ready to live for yourself? And before we close this space tonight, I want you to take one slow breath with me, not to fix anything, not to understand everything, just to feel where you are right now. Because if you have stayed until this moment, it means something inside you is listening, not to my voice, but to your own. Aquarius, your journey was never about waiting to be chosen. It was about remembering that you are already whole, that your sensitivity is not weakness, it is intelligence of the heart, that your depth is not a burden. It is a gift this world quietly needs. You did not come here for answers. You came here for resonance, for that subtle feeling of someone finally speaking your inner language. And maybe what you felt tonight was not recognition of the story, but recognition of yourself, the version of you who kept loving even when it was unclear, the version of you who stayed gentle in a world that teaches armor, the version of you who kept searching for meaning instead of settling for noise. There is nothing broken in you. There is nothing late about your timing. There is nothing missing that you need to chase. You are not behind. You are unfolding. And I want you to remember this. Every time you feel lost, it is usually because you are growing beyond an old identity. Every time something ends, it is often because your nervous system is learning a new truth. Every time your heart feels tired, it is asking for a deeper kind of love, the kind that begins with yourself. So, if this message touched you, leave a comment below with one word that describes how you feel right now. Not for me, for you. So, you can witness your own emotional state and honor it. And if you feel connected to this energy, subscribe to this channel. Not because you need more content, but because you deserve spaces that speak to your inner world, not just your outer life. More messages are coming, not predictions, not promises, but reflections, mirrors, and quiet truths your soul already knows. This journey does not end here. It deepens. And the next message will arrive when you are ready to hear it, just like this one did. Until then, Aquarius, trust your timing, trust your heart, and trust that the life unfolding in front of you is not random. It is responding to who you are becoming.